I work for the Eskimo Walrus Commission. It's been around since 1978. It currently has about 19 members from Barrow down to Bristol Bay, so we're pretty widespread. It's one of the many marine mammal commissions in Alaska, and this commission has a dedicated 19 members from Barrow down to Bristol Bay. So you can see the region that the commission is represented by. We have a co-management agreement with our federal government, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and we basically receive our funding through them. With the issues going on in D.C., we still don't know how much funding we're going to receive this year. But this IVOC, we call it on St. Lawrence Island, is a shared resource between Russia and Alaska. So we have some really good partners in Chukotka that we work with, collecting traditional knowledge and walrus harvest information between the two countries. And the commission is an advocate. We try to have a voice for our coastal walrus hunters from Barrow down to Bristol Bay. Our commissioners are dedicated, like I say. We often meet with our federal partners, and this is one of our meetings in Anchorage where our federal agency and other entities are invited to the table. But it's basically a meeting for the commissioners to discuss, the important things about walrus management. This is a photo that I often share. It's from a good friend of mine, Carlton Ray. It's a very dramatic view of a picture, and it often symbolizes how research by outside researchers views the Arctic in a very detached, distant, periodic way. So this is a very neat picture of IVOC on ice. But this is how we see the walrus, that is on ice. Our hunters see them, know them in their natural way, in a different season and conditions. We know that if this walrus and the environment are healthy, so are we that live in the Arctic communities. I also like to show these slides to scientists at the National Snow and Ice Data Center. It is a reminder to them that their research interest, the sea ice, or siku as we call it, is an everyday aspect of our life, and that we study it up close. And that it plays a major part of our lives for our hunters out on the ice. There's no satellite imagery here. Knowing siku is a survival skill. Last year, several marine mammal commissions in Alaska met in Bowdoin campus in Massachusetts, and there we formed what we call the Arctic Marine Mammal Coalition. It's made up of five marine mammal commission: the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission, Beluga Commission, Ice Seal Committee, Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission, Walrus Commission, and the Alaska Nanook Commission formed this coalition in September, and we basically gathered to address concerns about shipping increase in the Bering Strait. As you know, I think some of you are aware of it, that there's incredible amount of traffic that goes through the Bering Strait. We needed to form this coalition because we thought there was a good opportunity to voice our concerns about increased ship traffic in the Bering Strait in one unified voice. The Marine Mammal Commission, which is an agency in the United States, really encouraged us to speak in unified voice to address shipping issues. So we formed this coalition, and we were encouraged also by the U.S. Coast Guard to come up with one voice, because there are so many entities and commissions and agencies that are talking to the Coast Guard, and I think becoming formed as one voice, unified voice. We're able to address, we formed this coalition basically to address the shipping traffic through the Bering Strait. As you can see, this photo shows walrus migratory routes in the Arctic. This is kind of old, but it shows you the distribution patterns of this walrus. So we shared this information with the Coast Guard that when we met in Boden to show them the important walrus haulouts in U.S. and Russia. But one of the most compelling things that we heard when we were forming the coalition is that Tim Reagan, the executive director for the Marine Mammal Coalition, said, with the very significant hurdles faced by Alaska Natives in trying to communicate their individual concerns to federal regulators and decision makers, it is especially important for Alaska Native representatives to look for ways to join together and speak with a unified voice on areas of common concern. So that's kind of why we formed the coalition. So what is very special about the Bering Strait? I think it's very globally significant for its marine and coastal biological diversity, and critically important because it is where our subsistence resources come from. There's a couple of us that came from Alaska. One of them is a hunter, Roy Ashenfelter. So we get a lot of our marine resources from the waters. And this is one of a project that COERIC, where I work for, is involved in. They're trying to identify marine areas that are considered sensitive and important to coastal communities. So this project kind of shows you where subsistence use maps are developed, talking to our elders and very experienced hunters like Roy. So Lily Ray is working on this, and she's pretty much getting close to getting this project done, but it shows you where harvest areas are for walrus. It's a very interesting project because it's working with our hunters and experienced elders and others. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the traffic in the Bering Straits, but this one is shows you, it's a very busy area, and that's why I think forming the coalition is very important to address increased ship traffic in the region, because it is, something. If something happens, something catastrophic happens, it's very much of a concern to us because our infrastructure is very inadequate to address oil spills in our region. This is just a photo that I was taken out in Gamble on St. Lawrence Island. It came, supposedly, our hunters came across it and towed it back to land, but it came from a Russian vessel, which supposedly sank several miles southwest of Gamble, or St. Lawrence Island. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that our hunters are out there and they see the changes and are the first to see evidence of what's happening in our waters. And they towed it back to Gamble, and it came from a Russian vessel, but we didn't know what it was or where it came from. And until we work with some folks that say it may have come from a Russian vessel that sank, maybe a trawler, but our hunters were the first to see it and responded to it immediately by towing back to Gamble. And this is something that we thought might have come from, because it's a vessel that sank quite a ways from the island, but we have strong currents out there, and it may have floated close to island, and it was retrieved as quickly as possible because it posed a threat to migratory routes and basically a hazard to our hunters. This is just a group of folks that were involved in the ice seal working group. They're experienced hunters. As you can see from this photo, some are older and some are younger folks. And it's part of this ice seal walrus mapping project that really involves our local people in identifying critical and sensitive areas that will be useful for ship traffic. This is a photo also taken out on St. Lawrence Island. Our whaling captains often travel to the south side of the island. It takes about an hour to two, but this is what good ice means to us, because our hunters are able to tow a very large animal onto good ice and allows them to butcher it in safe grounds. And just this spring, we were able to harvest 4 bowheads in Savunga and 3 in Gamble. So it's a lot of work, but we need good ice to tow this big animal. And if it isn't, we often have to, if we don't have good ice, this is what happens. We have to butcher the big animal in the water, and it's very critical period for our hunters, because they work extra time and effort to retrieve as much meat as possible. And it's kind of shows you what good ice means to us and what it can do when it's very slushy. But it also, for the most part, if we have really bad slushy ice, it reduces our time for successful hunting. But these men work 24 hours a day for a couple of days to make sure that the meat is salvaged as much as possible. But because a big animal like a whale is very cherished, and nobody complained, but for the extra time and effort needed to care for this huge animal. And it's just another picture of how we block and tackle the bowhead whale to good ice, and these men work for a long period of time trying to salvage as much meat as possible. But both communities were successful, and I believe one of our other communities, Wales, up further north, was able to harvest bowhead whale too. And another thing that we are involved in is that I don't know if you are aware of the unusual mortality event that happened on our ice seal and walrus. It's a disease that occurred in our seals, and of course our hunters were the first to see this and reported to the appropriate agency to notify them that we were harvesting sick ice seals, and we're still trying to figure out what is causing this disease on seals and some on walrus to this day. But our hunters are very vigilant and reporting any unusual sightings of sick diseased or marine mammals. But it's something that the Commission is also involved in, because we work with other marine mammals in Alaska to joint efforts to make sure that these resources are healthy and are retrievable or accessible to when subsistence hunting occurs. And it's just another incident that happened. Our hunters on St. Lawrence Island were the first to cite these oil wildlife, and of course we work with the Coast Guard to determine what is causing this. And to this day, we still haven't identified what caused these oil wildlife to wash up on St. Lawrence Island. I think the point I'm making is that our hunters are always there, and the first responders, first to see any unusual or event that happens out in the waters. And this is another project that we are involved with. I'm sure Hayo, Aiken, and others from UAF will say more about this, but it's a Sea Ice and Walrus Outlook project that provides weather forecasts and sea ice condition to a number of communities in our region, St. Lawrence Island, Wales, and Shishmaref. And it's a unique project because we have a couple local folks that respond to the forecast and provide really ground truthing information back to folks that provide these information. But it's a really neat project because it involves our local folks with the science community. And it just shows you, pictures of sea ice conditions, which are very important for our marine mammal hunters because they can see where sea ice is to maximize their successful hunting, especially for whaling because it's a short opportunity right now, and whaling is basically done on St. Lawrence Island. But we're still working on this project and hopefully get more other communities involved, but funding is an issue here. And this is just one of the information that was gathered from local observer in Gamble and reporting back to this project, or the lead folks and that provides these maps to us. And this is what I was talking about, ground truthing. But it's a really neat project, and I hope that it continues and more communities are involved. And the Eskimo Walrus Commission was involved in collecting traditional knowledge about hunting opportunities in 5 communities. And I speak St. Lawrence Island Yupik, so whenever I have meetings with our hunters, especially on the island, I talk a lot because it's language and culture and are so much a part of our lives that this was an important project that we did with several hunters within 5 communities to collect their knowledge and document it, and it's been translated into English. And I'm sure some of you are aware of this, but it's another really unique project that University of Alaska Fairbanks did with, and Smithsonian did with collecting 99 terms for ice conditions in our region. I just saw this as in one of the exhibits out there, but it's all in Yupik and translated into English. But it's a good resource for different types of ice conditions that are known within our society. And I just wanted to end with this quote, which I thought is a very neat quote for why we formed this coalition, because the Alaska Native voice, our indigenous native voice, is very essential and is the only effective mechanism for the protection of Alaska Native marine subsistence resources and Native culture. And I want to thank IARC for including me with this in this summit. And it's good to see a couple of Arctic indigenous peoples in this conference, but I think we still have a long ways to go. I would highly encourage you to keep including us, especially when we're talking about Arctic indigenous communities, and because we want to be part of the solution as well as be part of science. But thanks to Maribeth for the opportunity to be here, and I think we're going in the right direction, because there are 3 features within our society: language, culture, and identity. Of Arctic indigenous life are inseparable. We can't separate these 3 features. To preserve an indigenous language, its cultural basis must be cherished and maintained, and for a community's cultural life to survive. Our spiritual beliefs must reinforce the traditional way of life. It must be valued and used most naturally as the language of weather and environment, traditional and customary hunting practices, food preparation and preservation, clothing, boat building, storytelling, singing, dancing, drumming, or whenever a community's traditional knowledge is valued and shared. A community is where language, culture, and identity are maintained and kept vital. Of course, there are multiple layers within a community: clans, entities like COERC, ICC, Alaska, Canada, Greenland, Russia, marine mammal organizations like the Walrus Commission, so many others, is where whenever our indigenous knowledge and values are promoted and passed on to the next generation. Our identities are supported through multiple relationships and group associations. So thank you for the opportunity again to be here, and hopefully we'll have more dialogue within the next couple of days.